Good morning. On behalf of all of us here at St. Patrick Church of Myrna, St. Mary's Church in Downs, we welcome all of you. Particularly want to welcome any guests who might be joining us, whether here in person or whether you're live streaming. We're blessed to have you here. I've seen just a growing number of people coming back to Mass, which warms my heart. Glad that people are feeling more comfortable as maybe more vaccines are being distributed and as Lent is beginning. So it's wonderful that more people are coming and that we have such a big church to accommodate. It's kind of funny. So we live in a little duplex kind of behind the church here, and Deacon Poole yesterday made reference of a fort being built in the yard. And I didn't even know what he was talking about, and I realized after Mass that when I had walked over, I was just paying attention to the dog, and like literally right next to the path, there's like this big mound of snow that the neighbors on the other side made with their grandkids. They had family visiting, and so anyways, if you're driving behind and see the big fort, one may think, but in fact it was not Father Martin and myself making a fort yesterday or this week with the snow. A quick story. I enjoy visiting the nursing homes, and this was some years back, but it's one of the more memorable or most memorable conversations that I've had in the last couple of years, and I think of it often. I was at a table with folks who live at the nursing home. I knew one of them, at least knew who they were, because I know one of his sons. And seeing him reminded me of something that I learned just in seminary. And so it's not as if I knew this like great fact and was showing off. It was more like pointing out the fact that like we as Catholics can be like familiar with something but not really understand its meaning. And so I asked the group, I said, how many of you, I'm like, who knows what Notre Dame translates to? Like it's one of the most prominent Catholic universities in the country and in the world. And I knew the one gentleman was going to know, but nobody else knew. And I didn't know. I mean, until seminary at some point. He piped up and he's like, it means Our Lady. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, isn't that crazy? Like we as Catholics can be familiar with something for our whole life and never even ask the question, not even really know the deeper meaning that's present. And then the lady sitting right next to me said, well, that's because the priest never told us. Fair enough. I'm like, well, now you know. And that notion of the priest never telling us has been something that has kind of resonated in my heart and mind and is my reason for this homily. I'd like to talk more about why we fast, why we abstain from meat and do other penitential, sacrificial things during Lent. Like what's the point of giving up chocolate or not eating in between meals or whatever, abstaining from something else during the Lenten season? What's the deeper meaning? And I'm certainly not going to exhaust the topic, but there's kind of one area I want to focus in on. Well, we first need to be familiar with the fact that we have desires. And here I'm specifically speaking of what Aristotle would call the desires that stem from our bodies. He calls them appetites. And so what are the appetites? Our appetite for food, for drink, for bodily comfort. And the last one, to keep it very family-friendly, I'll see acts that are proper to husbands and wives. Acts that are proper to marriage. These are all desires that each of us have. And they're good desires. Well, they're not bad. But we know and understand, particularly parents highlight this, your children highlight the fact that they have these desires. But parents realize and know that just because a child has a desire doesn't mean that it needs to be fulfilled at that moment and in the manner that they want it. You don't have to be around a kid long for a parent to tell the kid what? No. They will continue, it's just like Hubert. I mean, he'll keep eating treats all day. He knows no limits. Although it really looks like I'm the one eating the treats and he doesn't, but you have to tell the kids no. Listen, no, it's time to go to bed. You just had a snack. You're not having anything else till dinner. You're not going to spoil your appetite. So we know and understand that these appetites are good, but they need to be put in check. They need to be we can't just be enslaved to them. And part of the maturing process, hopefully, is growing in our ability to have discipline. But we know and understand, it's hard sometimes. These desires we have of our bodies can be strong. And so, fasting gives us an opportunity to put them in check, to grow in our self-discipline. And this is a struggle basically for everybody, because we have concupiscence, the result of the fall. That's where our reason and willpower don't necessarily have control over our passions sometimes. Before the fall, that wasn't the case. There wasn't this propensity to sin, to allow the passions to not have control over reason and our will. So it's important for us as Christians and as Catholics to strive to be disciplined, to say no to self. Now, we're not just simply a bodily creature. We have a body and a soul. We know that from the very moment of conception, mom and dad provide the body, but God provides his part. They create a life with God, and a soul is infused. And so just as there are appetites or desires appropriate to the body, so too there's desires appropriate to the soul. And here's where it's important for us to have an awareness of these desires appropriate to the soul, because often they're not though they're just as real, the appetites of the body often take precedence. We're much more aware of them. And often we can live life striving to fulfill those appetites and even disregard and maybe even be unaware consciously of the desires of our souls, because those desires of the body are so strong. Another reason why it's important to grow in our ability to say no to them, so that we become more aware of our soul and its desires, namely for God. Saints write beautifully about this desire of our soul. And I think deep down, if we're striving to live our spiritual lives, we know and recognize that when we quench a desire of the body, it does not last. We're hungry again. We're thirsty again. We end up desiring more. It's never enough. And so thus it's only God who really fulfills us. And Lent gives you and I an opportunity to grow in awareness of this deep desire of each of our souls that's only quenched in God. And it's different. It's interesting how different all of us are and how different our bodily desires may be in their particularness. This desire of the soul is the exact same in each and every one of us, because God has placed it there and has made us that it's only going to be Him who fulfills us. It's only Him who's going to fulfill us. Admittedly, the other practices that happen in Lent, it's a season of prayer, of fasting, and of almsgiving. All three of those can really help enliven the desire we have for God in our souls. But in a particular way, this morning, I wanted to focus on why we fast. And so as we continue our Lenten journey, striving to be ever entering into the sacrificial elements of Lent, may we in a particular way, as we grow in self-discipline, self-mastery, saying no to those bodily passions, may that desire for God, that deeper desire of our soul, grow, and may we seek to live the lives that God is calling us to.